2017. First order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest. Nothing. Then we have one action item. It's a recommendation for refusal for B33-17.44. And Chris is going to present.
This is the consent application. It's related to an official plan amendment that was done, I believe, probably about 2 months ago. And the purpose of this is, as you remember, on the boundary. You had two applications on the boundary of Hanover, a little bit located in Brockton. This is the strip area out near Becker's store. And one was recommended for approval, and this is one that the plan amendment was recommended for refusal. And it's an infill lot at a residential area. For various reasons, there was a recommendation for refusal. And similarly, for the same reasons, a staff recommendation for refusal on the consent. I believe you're familiar with the property. I will say that in terms of to move forward, you've seen the staff recommendation. However, the council has approved the plan amendment. So unless there's been a significant change of thinking from council, then the consent application would follow with the plan amendment. I should mention this is one that for whatever reason has not been appealed by anybody. The appeal date is either yesterday or today or somewhere around that area. So no appeals from the ministry. The reasons for the staff recommendation are essentially similar, if not the same, to the initial report, but again, up for council's discussion for approval or refusal, and so for consideration.
Thank you. I guess we'll take the recommendation and then some discussion. The recommendation is that Bruce County consent application B33-17.34 for severance of plus or minus 0.08 hectares as modified and recommended by the planning department be refused. Is there a mover for that?
I'm confused. I saw that. What was that? So we approved it before, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're going to refuse it.
Well, I think we should get the motion on the floor and let's have a discussion. Okay, so do we have a move by Paul, seconded by Ann? So let's have some discussion on this. Ann?
I was just wondering what has changed. Like, I read it, but I was still confused on it.
So there's 3 applications in order to create the lot, and the 2 applications before the committee. And one of the applications was already dealt with by this committee, and it was the plan amendment. It was the official plan amendment. And council had approved the official plan amendment, and it's gone through its appeal period and so on, and there's been, to my knowledge, no appeals filed to the application. The final step in the process is technically the actual consent application. And the authority to grant consent approval is delegated to staff. And for the most part, we just approve them routinely if it meets all the policies and so on. If there's an application that I can't approve or don't feel comfortable approving, then I bring it forward to the committee. And in this case, we have a case whereby clearly council stated on principle and its intentions that this lot be created by passing the plan amendment. And now you have the consent application. If you wish to make a decision that's consistent with your approval of the plan amendment, then you would approve this. If you have any reservations about the lot being created since the time that the official plan amendment has been approved, then you should refuse it. The staff recommendation, it really is based on the same principle as the original application for the official plan amendment.
David?
Well, Brockton Council has approved this application. We don't agree with some of the items that are listed there that say why it shouldn't be approved. It makes a lot of sense to me personally. Two building lots in Brockton. I know it's right on the border. We can't control where people shop. In Brockton, there are a lot of people that live on the east side, Marl Lake area, Lake Rossland, who consider Hanover their center, so to speak, but they are happy to live in Brockton. So it's our opinion that the application should be approved.
Sorry, Robert?
Yeah, I was just looking at this, trying to read through here. This lot here, it is now zoned residential in agricultural
No.
prime, like what is this lot here? It is,
There was an amendment approved by, initially, it would have been potential to build a single house on the property. And the owner of the land wanted to create 2 lots. In order to create the 2 lots, it doesn't meet the county policy and zoning and so on. So there's a number of applications submitted in order to create the lot.
okay, I understand all that. But so this person that owns this lot right now, if he left it the way it is, he could build a big house on it just the way it is right now, right?
I would say yes.
Yeah, okay. So why not 2 houses?
Ann?
I think I said this at the other meeting, but, so, in the town of Kincardine, when I see who's shopping in Kincardine, there's a lot from here in Kinloss, you know, and we've got here in Kinloss right up to ours, and I'm sure in Saugeen Shores, you see a lot of people from the northern part of Kincardine, they consider Port Elgin their town, so I just don't get a lot of the arguments that I read over. I agree with Dave.
Thanks, Ann. Any other comments? I comment on this too. Well, all these ones with this big red X, I think we should be we've got evaluation criteria in our planning documents, and nowhere does it say we shouldn't approve something where you can't walk to school or any of these. I don't think they belong in the planning report, these things, or where they should shop, or where they should go to the hospital. I mean, hopefully, if you're sick, you would go to the closest hospital and the one that can best serve you, not. It shouldn't be included in a planning report, any of these, I don't think. You know, I mean, if you go back, even on an application, if you go back to the Form 1 that we use for this criteria, it doesn't ask any of those questions. Are you likely to walk to school? Why would you include that in a planning report? I have no idea. Go ahead.
So I think in fairness, the previous reports that we've been working on, the council basically delve right into the actual policy that it offends, and for a recommendation or approval or refusal. And we don't do any evaluation in terms of the overall goals and objectives of the plan. And so by way of example, I've asked our planners to maybe experiment with the reports a bit in terms of the format, to maybe better explain their reasoning or their rationale. And the reasoning and the rationale is not ones that they make up. They're ones that are within the goals and objectives of the plan. So by way of example, the plan tries to encourage lot creation to go into urban areas where there's sewer and water, because this creates economies of scale and creates communities, opportunities for shopping, for school, for compact communities, so on and so forth. So in this report, I've challenged the planner to come out and sort of tease out some of those things that are found within the broader goals and objectives of the plan, and to use those to make a recommendation in terms of, on the balance, these are some of the things that in their mind get to why it doesn't meet the overall goals and objectives and direction of the plan, and also to put a check mark beside some of the ones that we knew would be reasons for council to approve this. And we've included those in the report as well, such as assessment growth and infilling. So I guess this report challenged the planner to provide some more common language around the reasons why they're making a recommendation, why in their mind they feel it's good planning or bad planning or in the public interest or whatever. So why you're seeing that format is, again, it was a challenge to try to change the report format to see if it was something that was more sensible and more readable to council. And from what I'm hearing from you, apparently that's not the case here. But again, in response to trying to make the reports more legible and clear in terms of the rationale for the recommendations.
Well, you haven't convinced me yet, Chris. Some of them are very specific. Requires a car to access shopping. How many people in Ontario can get all of their shopping needs in walking distance?
So again, it's a reflection of what this planner felt was the objective in the county plan in terms of trying to locate urban uses in urban areas which is the overall objective of the county plan.
You know, I mean, I don't want to nitpick, but I go down to another one, cannot walk to school. How many kids can walk to school in the Grey Bruce? The school board, in their comments, didn't object to this. In fact, I would suspect that they would be quite happy to have 2 residents filled with school-age kids in these lots, because we're more and more busing kids farther and farther, closing schools because of declining enrollment. I think that's the way I would look at this. And a number of them. I mean, I don't want to nitpick, but, you know, the hospitals. Well, hospitals are funded provincially. You should be able to go to whatever hospital you want to. And it shouldn't be considered in a land use planning application, I don't think. Anyways, I guess that's my comments. So, any other comments on the recommendation? So the recommendation is that we refuse these consents. Are we ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's defeated. So then I guess I need a motion then to approve it. Moved by, that we approve this severance. Moved by David, seconded by Janice. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? That's carried. So let's go on to the next item then. Regional economic development.
Okay, so next is an update in terms of the, you recall in the strategic plan for economic development for the county, there was a call for communication and coordination between the local municipalities and those others working within the community on economic development. There's been a number of meetings held so far, and the purpose of the initial meetings is to sort of align projects and priorities. So we're moving together as partners over the next couple of years as we deliver the program. So I'll ask maybe Kara to give a quick rundown in terms of the report and some of the things that have been happening.
Sure, thank you very much. As Chris said, this was one of the recommendations from the Economic Development Strategic Plan to form a working group, and when we came out to all the local councils, we asked to have a staff and a business community rep from each municipality appointed to the committee. So we have about 16 people on the committee plus county staff. We get together quarterly throughout the year, so we've held 2 meetings so far. And in those 2 meetings, the group has identified 7 priority areas that they want to work on that are in the table there in the report. And also at the end of the report, there's a brief synopsis of each of those areas if you'd like to delve in it further just to see what the details are. The group since then, after putting them together, has then prioritized them into a little bit of an action plan on where they want to focus in the coming years, recognizing that this group work is sort of sitting on the side of everyone's desk and that we'll need to move it forward sort of systematically over the coming years. So they went through a priority or ranking of the priorities, and you can see from there our focus is on collaboration and the communications improvement between what's happening at the county level and at the local level. So that's our first year priority, and then moving into the workforce development priority area for the second year. So right now that group is scheduled to have its 3rd meeting in September, and we are including updates to committee here just so that you're aware of the conversations that are going on and that we can circulate the information publicly as well. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Any questions of Kara? Doesn't look like it. Well, thanks very much. So the next item then, I believe, is our Bruce Lenz. Am I correct there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you recall, we had a session with
Bruce,
council. Sorry.
That's right. That's right.
Am I ready to go?
Yep. Sorry.
We had a session with council to kick off the idea of the Bruce County lens, and in that meeting we talked about some of the policy directions that should come out of that, and also to the relationship with local municipalities, the types of service that we provide to the public. And there was a terms of reference that was prepared that went back to be approved by the council in terms of how we're going to engage the community, the next phase of the review, and so on, and looking at ways that will potentially form new KPIs for us coming up in terms of what council expects out of the planning service. So I'll turn it over to Bruce Stickney. He's been sort of leading the process with the interviews and so on, and he'll provide you with some information and potentially some requests in terms of how we assist in moving this forward.
Thanks, Chris. So following on from Chris's comments, we developed a questionnaire to get information from our key informants, which are councillors and staff at the local municipalities and so on. We sent that out to individuals on July 5th, and that has been open now from that time and until today, collecting information. We also had essentially two other sources of information, which are from applicants and so on. Some of that was gathered voluntarily by providing a SurveyMonkey link with our email address and so on, so that those results were compiled over 2015 and 16. And then to extend that, we actually started calling applicants from our 2016 files. I should back up and say that the voluntary survey was conducted to anyone receiving our email. So it could have been applicants, it could have been owners, it could have been lawyers, it could have been people just asking questions about their property or the zoning or something else, and that didn't result in an application. So then the second part that I was mentioning is we started to call applicants who had filed applications and so on during 2016. And we were able to poll about 37% of those up until now. And we tried to maintain approximately the number, a comparative number for each municipality. So for example, if Saugeen Shores had 40 applications in the year, we tried to poll 40% of those, or whatever the number would be. And similarly, we did the same for South Bruce, even though they may have only had a third of that number of applications. So it was somewhat representative of each municipality. We selected them at random, so there was we didn't have information in front of us when we were making the selection that indicated whether the application was successful, whether the application was modified at some point during the process or any of that. So we tried to keep it as neutral as we could. And we have results from that, which throughout the polling period, it seemed to indicate that we were achieving some sort of reasonable result from the 37% or so in terms of how it was affecting the results and so on. So over time, you see the variation is sort of averaging out, and you're starting to see the numbers for the various questions that were asked being a bit more meaningful and less subject to variation because of the size of the pool that we were sampling from. With regard to the key informant survey, and I'll apologize now for the length of the survey, many of you have seen it. It's got 40 questions in it, and we tried to gather information for a number of different purposes, including communications. We polled on certain issues or policy areas to try to get an understanding of where people were positioned on those things, and so on, practices and procedures that we use within the planning department. To date, we have about 40%, I had the number here, I believe. We have about 40% of the expected number of total responses that we could have obtained. And the only problem we're having with it is that there are a number of the questions, of the 40 questions, there are a fair number of questions that we're not getting a strong response one way or the other, so it's difficult to proceed with any decisions on how to move one direction or another on certain questions, which perhaps a larger sample pool would help to sort of spread that out a bit so that we can see more clearly what's going on. We also have a bit of a disparity, if I can use that word, in the sense that we have low responses from some municipalities and higher responses from others, which somewhat favor the higher responding communities or municipalities in sort of moving the needle, or whatever you want to call that. So, for example, we have one municipality that has only provided one response, two with two responses, and then we have two municipalities that make up 40% of the sampling. And that's the bothersome part, is that we're hearing we're overrepresented in some and underrepresented in others in a sense, so that we may not be getting the true mood of the councils and communities. So that's a worry that we have about taking the information as it's come to us at this point in time. Also, maybe of a lesser concern, although perhaps not for you, about 45% of the responses have been from municipal staff. That should actually be a bit lower if we look at the total number of individuals who are invited to respond. So the staff numbers are somewhat overrepresenting the total pool of individuals that were asked to participate in the survey. We have identified, as the survey went on and we received a few comments back from people, there are a few little glitches in the survey that we're not sure how they happen to be created. One of them is that some questions have been skipped, even though the survey was set up so that you had to provide an answer. So I'm not sure how that happened. It may be a SurveyMonkey issue. We haven't really been able to tell. I should mention that I have not gone into individual responses. I've been looking at the pooled responses. So at this point in time, I really don't know what individual questions have been skipped in a particular individual's response. So there's a bit of a glitch in the survey that way. Similarly, there are questions where we've asked yes, no, or other, and if anyone had difficulties deciding on yes or no, they could offer a text response to that, either that they didn't wish to answer, or they could answer I don't know, or whatever the case may be, so that they could move on through the survey. And we had hoped that we could cover off the majority of the questions that way. So that's sort of a summary, I guess, of the information that we have available to us right now. It does worry us a bit about the sort of skew or the disparity, where we have 40% of the responses from only two municipalities. And so it could be a little bit lopsided, or may not be representing your municipality as well as you would like. And so what I'm looking for, I think, today is an indication from you whether we should just proceed with the data we have and make some assumptions about that, and try to consider how we will address those in our procedures and practices and communications, etc. That pretty much wraps up what I wanted to say. If you have questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them, but I'll finish there.
Thanks, Bruce. Any questions, comments? Ann?
I did try to complete it, but that's where I got bogged down, was yes didn't fit, no didn't fit, and I made a comment, but then the program wouldn't let me go on. So I just quit, but I was near the end, or I thought, so I never got back to it, because there was a couple places it was hard just to say a direct yes or no, but most of the time you could, but just I didn't want to skew your information by saying yes or no, and I thought the comment would be better. So that was just one thing, but maybe most people don't care. Just put down yes or no.
Janice?
Thanks, Bruce. Did it go to council members as well, or staff and the mayors, or who did that all go to?
The key informant survey was sent out to all municipal councillors, the mayors included, and then it went to key staff, and in most cases, those were recommended to us. So, for example, I think in perhaps all of them, the clerks received it, sometimes the CBO and Public Works. It depended a bit on what the individual municipalities wanted and who they thought were best informed to be able to fill out the survey.
Robert?
When I got that email and that survey at a next council meeting, I told our councillors, it is your duty to fill that out because the county wants to know what to do. Please fill out the survey. And I wouldn't be surprised if we were one of those 2 municipalities that was way up there.
Ann, go ahead.
Maybe the rest of us should go back and try that. I don't know what luck I'd have, but it didn't take long. It's just I couldn't get through it.
It is important. The councillors should have stepped up to the plate and did what they're supposed to. That's why they're elected officials. Do what you're voted to do, step up to the plate.
I think you made a really good effort. You know, what to do with it, I think, you know, proceed as you're doing it, but then when we, I mean, I think we need to understand, under those parameters, if you don't think it's a fair representation of the county or it's skewed by one particular, I mean, you're going to, I don't think you could discard this information now after we have to do something with it, and I think we can probably move forward with the information that we've got and go. You want to speak, Kelly? Sure.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I do recommend before closing it off, if there's support around committee table, that we do one more public appeal. The concern that I have is we could potentially be having an impact on our service model, and I would hate for that to be driven by 2 of our 8-member municipalities. Just on the perspective of population, that's all. If there's agreement for that, but it will slow the process down a little bit.
Chris?
Just so we're clear too in terms of, and thank you, Kelly, from my perspective is that it's been said in the countryside that there's issues with how we deliver the service. And then we ask people and they go silent. And this is a problem because I'm being asked by my executive to report back. And unless those people step up to the plate, it puts me in a very real bind. And I've told my staff, leave no stone unturned, right? So everything is on the table. So I need to know. And if you could message your counselors back that Chris needs to know, because if there's something that we need to fix, then we have to. So appreciate your support for collection of further data on the survey.
Janice?
Thanks. I agree. Like, you know, like I would hope that that my municipality filled that out, but I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps they didn't. So I would love to have an opportunity to speak to them directly. We do have a meeting tomorrow. If we can have this go around a second time, I'd be really happy to talk directly to my council.
I can certainly send out another reminder tomorrow or whenever you feel is appropriate. And maybe along with your assistance, we can get a bit stronger response.
And also too, if I may, an offer, if somebody feels the survey is clunky, go off the survey and send us an email. If there's additional comments, something doesn't fit the box, certainly send us an email, give us a call, talk to us. Any of those things are on the table.
If you could just add that to the email, then that would be good as well. And I'll try my best. We don't have a meeting until September now. We just had ours last night. And, but we can send out an email to, if you send it to me and our staff, and then we can send it out to council and get the message across that this is vital information for the county planning department. Be great.
Thank you, Ann. Any further questions? If not, thanks very much, Bruce. Now, the next item on the agenda is the land evaluation area review, and Chris is going to.
Thank you. And this report is truly for information. It's like an introduction to the concept of LEAR. We've spoken about it before. And what a LEAR is, it's an alternative way of determining what is an agricultural area. And the Bruce County official plan is like many official plans of its age, and they're still using the same methodology, defined agricultural areas using Canadian land inventory, which were maps that were done by the federal government years ago, and it really looks at the capability of land, I believe, to grow cereal crops. And there's a number of different subclasses within there, including stony, being stony, wet, so on and so forth. There was a methodology developed a number of different years ago and said Canadian land inventory is not the only way to determine what is agriculture and what should be within the rural. And this is, again, it's commonly accepted. Methodology was tested down at Kincardine back a number of years ago with some successful results as well. So again, going back to the county map, it deals in big blocks of land, and it uses a 40-hectare designation criteria. So if there's a block that is at least 200 acres in size, it gets an A designation. What happens sometimes, there are smaller blocks of lesser capability land included within there, and if they're not at least 200 acres, then they're trapped within the A designation, and the reverse works for the rural designation as well. So in terms of the policy context, in terms of from the provincial perspective, again, LEAR is an accepted guideline that's used by the province and accepted for official plan mapping and so on and so forth. The provincial policy statement, which everybody likes to talk about, there's a requirement that local municipalities identify areas that are prime agriculture and protect them from urban uses to ensure long-term success of farming. But also the provincial policy does say alternative evaluation methods can be used, and so there's no issue in terms of the provincial perspective. The Bruce County official plan does recognize that we use just Canadian land inventory, but there's policy language in there saying should a different methodology come up or found advisable, that could be applied to, so no restrictions or barriers coming out of a county policy or the provincial policy. So it's a multivariate analysis and to determine the components of what is a system, an agricultural system. And each of these components, they're weighed, they're given a score, and then a threshold is applied so that the lands are either inside or outside of the system. And this is the beauty of the LEAR. It produces a map, and it shows what's inside the agricultural system and what's out. So potentially a more accurate community-based type of mapping is employed. Their LEAR suggest that in terms of the total count or the total score for alternative land review, that Canadian land inventory would count for no less than 50%, and all the other community factors would contribute the other 50% into the system. By way of example, in terms of Kincardine, it was done in 2013 and led to official plan amendment number 58. And their objectives within the community in Kincardine were to identify and evaluate soil capability, and to determine and evaluate other factors that influence agriculture, so not just about soil. Secondly, they wanted to use local knowledge, the farmers and residents and councils, to guide the research and to guide the analysis for the area. Thirdly, they wanted to clearly document the required information, so it would be hard to challenge, it would make sense, it would be somewhat scientific before they started. And all of the LEAR scores were set out in terms of the percentages before the mapping actually started. And it resulted in a fairly clear and digitized digital map that showed a true representation of the potential rural and agricultural areas. So once the science, so to speak, was ironed out, it was a bit of a no-brainer at the council level because they were able to show their work in terms of this is the criteria and this is how the mapping fit the criteria. So within that, they used a smaller evaluation unit. They looked at 100-acre blocks as opposed to 200-acre blocks. And the fact that they used, and there could have been many more, but they used Canadian land inventory, so that's CLI. They ranked that at 50%. topography. So given in that area, there's some of the slopes were too steep to farm, and were actually treed or had poor drainage, no evidence of farming. So topography was a consideration as to whether or not it's considered a farming area. Arable land, so looking at crop maps, which OMAFR produced at the time. Is there any existence of cropping going on right now currently in the area? The area of the parcel, so as an area of fragmentation, parcel size and so on, has already been cut up to the extent where nobody could possibly farm. And they looked at surrounding land use. It could have a chunk of agricultural land that's small, but is surrounded by, you know, like schools or something that would have a separation distance factor that would prohibit. And then finally, drainage was a factor as well. So some areas, good high capability soil, it's never been drained, it can't be drained. Other situations where it had drainage restrictions but has since been tiled and now is in fact arable. So some of these factors not showing up in the 50% category, but being brought in through this community evaluation. And again, they looked at fragmentation surrounding land use. So in the Kincardine example, a perfect parcel of land would score 1,000 points, and the maximum calculated score in the study was 993. Lands with a score in excess of 820 were productive agricultural operations, and lands with a score of less than 820 were dominated by wetlands, forest, scrubland, and residential development and kicked out of the map. Therefore, the Agricultural Committee determined that the threshold score would be 820. And again, thresholds above and below would dictate the map. So based on what I've seen of how it's worked in the province and within Kincardine, I would provide you with 5 general observations about it. And first of all, it's important to have community input. The county plan was really just a map. And we said at the time, given money, given constraints, given the size of the county, it's an accepted methodology to use just Canadian land inventory. In a lot of cases, it looked pretty good. Some cases, maybe not, but that was the methodology that was chosen. So once you bring the community in, they can start talking about what is their experience in farming, what's truly agricultural, what's truly rural. And you have that steering committee set up from the very beginning that sets the criteria out. So there's no big surprises when the mapping comes through. So if we use this methodology in the county, it would dictate a broad community involvement, but there would be opportunities for a more definitive made in Bruce County solution. Secondly, I've mentioned practice shows that the land evaluation, being Canadian land inventory, should account for no less than 50% of the total score, which makes sense. Point number 3, the county does have pretty good mapping resources available for a project such as this. However, depending on the range of factors included in the area review, additional data would have to be collected. Scale and scope would dictate costs and effort. So what I mean by that, if you look at the Kincardine example, they used 100 acres as the base unit size. So they're evaluating every 100-acre parcel. And you take that across the county, and that's a fairly fine net. So the costs would escalate with the granularity of the data. The more you drill down, the more expensive it is to look at that on a case-by-case basis. The final thing is really important is that the data set and weighing for the area review should be set prior to engaging in a mapping exercise. Nothing worse than sending away the mappers, saying these are the criteria, this is how it's weighted. People see the map and say we don't like the map, that's not what we wanted. So a lot of community input at the beginning to define what is an agricultural area. The final is that as the valuation includes factors other than Canadian land inventory, the end result will result in a share shift change in what is now considered rural versus agriculture. Given the large amounts of marginal grassland farms that have been recently tile drained and improved within the county, some preliminary hints regarding such shifts could be predicted. So what I'm getting at here is, and I mentioned this to you before, there's a lot of areas within the county, north of Terra, south of Sauble Beach, areas that are designated as, currently in the plan as rural with a lot of constraints, and they were grassland, if at that. Last 4 or 5 years, a lot of those lands have been tiled and put into corn, beans, with significant funds invested into those lands. To take a look at these criteria, anybody would probably say those lands are rural, but now belong within the agricultural designation because the constraints regarding soil capability have been overcome, and the constraints regarding heat units and the rest have been overcome by GMOs, quality fertilizer type of equipment, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, you'll run into areas such as the areas, fringe areas on the edge of urban areas that have been developed over the years. There's so many constraints in terms of small lot sizes and the rest. Land capability is currently agriculture, remains in agriculture, and so potentially a strong argument for converting some of those areas from agriculture into rural. There's a whole chunk of land that's located, for example, north of Southampton urban envelope. A lot of it designated as agriculture, and that is, you know, small lots. A lot of urban uses have been introduced over the years, and potentially again, that would end up being an area that would likely be put into the rural designation as opposed to the agricultural designation. In the Kincardine example, I wouldn't say it's by chance, but the way it worked out is a lot of lands that were designated as agriculture were brought into rural. But I think that was a special circumstance because they were looking at this confined area that was between the Algonquin Bluff, running sort of from Inverhuron to the Kincardine urban area down to the shoreline, where it's pretty much all designated as agriculture and not a lot of evidence of active farming because of drainage constraints, because of slopes, because of wetlands, because of organic soils, so on and so forth. So when that one was kind of logical that if you looked at it, you would say, holy cow, you know, we've lost all this agricultural land. But the community would have said it was never agricultural land in the first place, given the community criteria that was set. So that's a quick rundown of how it works. Something you would like to pursue. My recommendation to you would be, as Mr. Stickney mentioned previously, as part of the Bruce, the Bruce Lens review in the agricultural policies, I would suggest that we review the agricultural and rural policies to eliminate repeating applications, first of all, and then secondly, if there's still a desire to go down the road towards the LEAR, then look at that potentially down the road after we do the policy review first. Worthwhile, yes. Lengthy, yes. Do we have most of the data? Yeah, we do. But your costs are going to be in how fine of a sieve you want to put it through, and then you want to have a lot of community involvement, so community open houses, consultation, and so on. This is a little bit different than doing it in Kincardine, where there's a small group of farmers who know every farm field and the constraints, and blowing that up and going countywide, and having that methodology that everybody would be satisfied with for information purposes.
Thank you. Questions? I got a couple of comments. You know, Chris, I think this is one of the things I think that we often disagree with is this type of, you know, the first application, for instance. I don't know, to me, I'd like to get to a place where we could support that type of thing. And that's my vision of where the Bruce Lens would take us. We'll have a policy to say, you know, that's really not prime agricultural land. And so we can support this idea. This, I mean, this, and I think there's, I agree with you, there's a good criterion. It'll take I think a pretty lengthy time to do it. But for the VAT, this is, I think from my perspective, we're trying to respond to a very few incidents of this, because for the most part, I think, you know, prime agricultural land, where it is prime agricultural land, I think it's very rare that we ever have a disagreement on that. It's around those fringes, like Southampton, like that one we talked about today. Right, to me, it's right in an urban setting, and we're calling that agricultural land. And I guess if this will lead us to that point where we're going to say, no, that isn't agricultural land, I'd like to think that we could get there, but anyways.
You would have an answer to why. If people ask why is it designated, you would be able to show them the criteria and say this is the why. And where now it's very difficult for people to understand because you use a broad approach across the whole region. So
I guess that's where I struggle, because I think, you know, for me, I say, why is it designated agricultural? When it clearly not being farmed and is not likely to ever be farmed again, that particular piece there, it's almost impossible to farm that. You couldn't get half the equipment that we have nowadays in there. So why do we say that? when, and I guess your argument is we need some criteria to say that, yes or no to it, but I think it's pretty obvious. And maybe I'm being, Ann, sorry.
I think it's very difficult, and again, relies kind of on the local knowledge. So would it not be better if it was done on a municipality basis instead of having one for right across the county, or is that impossible? And the other thing is the size. You know, like Mike said, if it's an acre or if it's a half acre, yes, it's an agriculture, but the owner, it's never going to be part of a 100-acre farm again or something. Then it really doesn't make sense. But it's an individual. If it was over in the Middle East or someplace where they farm an acre by hand, or it was pioneer days, it's different. But the farming today has changed. And I guess if it was in Kinloss or in Kincardine where, you know, you have the Amish and Mennonites, maybe a couple acres would make a difference. But again, it's kind of specific to each area. It depends on, I think our method of doing it, depending on the local knowledge, is good. Now so I don't see, trying to get a one-size-fits-all for the whole county is going to be pretty tough. But I think it's good to have it for certain areas, like if Saugeen Shores had one. So I'm trying to figure out, is it better just every lower tier kind of work at it themselves in conjunction with you than to try and do it all across the county? That's just my question.
And I thank you for that, and there's lots of opportunities in terms of how you would skin that cat. I would say that in an instance where a municipality went through a LEAR review, and there's evidence that they followed some evidence they followed the process in terms of the criteria, it would be very easy for any planner to make a recommendation back to say the county plan map should be amended, right? The county, because it is the county plan map. As I take no issue with that. You're running into some economies of scale if you do it county-wide. And are we at the point whereby the type of farming in the county now is becomes so universal, and it will be universal with large mechanized machinery, tile drains, the advancements and the rest of it, that farming is farming across the county? So it could be either approach. And I think that, but still keep in mind, if this methodology is trying to look at a system of what is an agricultural system and recognizing all these factors with the community input, there's always going to be cases where there's a small lot in the countryside that's a couple of acres, and it could be 2 1-acre lots. Or it's a chunk of marginal land on your farm or somebody else's farm, and you would say it does no harm to have a lot there in that location. This approach is not really intended on doing that. It's saying that if it's within the system, then urban uses in general, in terms of intensification and so on, should go to the rural area. And you need to, and I agree with the chair, in a lot of ways it seems that on a yearly basis we have 10 or 12 of these applications in the countryside that we continue to knock heads on. For the most part, the county plan has been very, very successful in directing urban uses to go to urban areas, and we've had some great successes in terms of working with your municipalities in terms of infilling affordable units, multiple use, dealing with complex neighborhood issues that you've seen, trying to make sustainable urban areas, and it's been great. But it's these ones in the countryside that come back and haunt us. So I think the mapping will allow for a broader community understanding. Whether we do it on a municipal basis, we should consider that. Whether it be county-wide, I have no preference at this point, but certainly we consider that.
Go ahead, Ann. So
I did live at Holyrood for a little while, and the farming there was the big size. Bigger tractors, the better, etc. And then the Mennonite population moved in, and they like all these little industries on their farms, a sawmill, making coffins, making furniture, whatever. And so to say you can apply something to the Huron-Kinloss Mennonite community or the Kincardine Amish community. It just even within our own municipalities, there's a lot of variation. Yes, the big agricultural is taking over most of it, but there are exceptions. You still have people that, you know, want to try and make a living off 50 acres, and not just Mennonite and Amish either. So I think I still think the one size fits all is very difficult to determine.
I just, one more comment. I mean, I don't disagree with the criteria, but wouldn't an easier way to do this would adopt this criteria on a case-by-case basis? For instance, this application, we could use that application, which we looked at today, we could set this criteria, and instead of mapping the whole county where we know these are, in my mind, very rare instances, in my mind, fairly rare instances, 8 or half a dozen a year maybe, or maybe more, where we, again, butt heads and disagree on, where we find that, oh, our plan doesn't really reflect what the elected officials want. And is that another method, Chris? I don't know.
I think, so in terms of the, take a purist approach, the Lear methodology says, no, it should be about a community determining what is the system, as opposed to on a case-by-case basis. I very strongly feel that we should come together and make the policies as flexible as county should wish them to be, but at the same time recognizing that whatever you do with that map, there's still going to be people applying that are within the agricultural area, and saying that should be an exception. And the beauty of the planning system that we have in the province is that it allows the planner to make the best recommendation they can based on whether they think it's good planning, and allows council to make the best decision they can based on that recommendation and other factors that they may know about, other things they may think may support the community. So in general, it used to be a case-by-case evaluation before we had the mapping. OMAFR was involved. You'd send it to them. They'd give you a checklist. They'd say, no, this is not agricultural. We have no interest. And they got to decide. They got out of that business and said, now the county decides, where's your map? And that's what led to the map. I'll leave your, could we have better evaluation criteria in the plan? I think we should look at that, and I take that as advice. Whether or not that should dictate that we don't need to take a further look at this, I'm not so sure.
Any further comments? Have a pretty good discussion on this. I think we'll move on. So the next item then is the Business to Bruce Starter Company Plus program, and Kara is going to present it.
Thank you. This is really an exciting report to present to committee. As you'll remember, in April of this year, we signed an agreement with the Province of Ontario for 2 years with the Starter Company Plus program. And this program is a $5,000 grant to start, expand, or purchase a business in Bruce County. We've scheduled that, so we have 26 grants that we have available for us to give out over the 2 years. And we had our first intake earlier this year, and I'm happy to note that we awarded 8 grants within Bruce County in that first intake. So on the second page there, you'll see the list of the awarded applicants. And one of the things I note with those is that they are all across Bruce County, which was one of the goals of us taking over the Enterprise Center, was how do we start to expand those services throughout the entire county. So these are our 8 first intake successful applicants, and they will begin about a 9-month process with us in order to support them in starting up that business. So the process incorporates training, and at the end of this report too, you'll see the series of seminars and workshops that are available for this fall. And while our applicants participate in them, they are open to the public as well. So if you know of any business owners that may be interested, they're more than welcome to join us at those. They also get support for business plan writing, and that's with our staff. They present their business plan, a little bit like a Dragon's Den format, but a little friendlier probably, to a committee for feedback and for eligibility in the grant. And then they receive their initial grant money, so that was just awarded. and then start a process of mentoring and monitoring. So the mentoring is with successful business owners in our communities, and they start to work with them over that 6-month period. And then once they've completed that, they would get the remainder of their 25% of their grant. So like I said, this is a really good news story for us. It's our first intake, and we're all really excited by our 8 applicants. And you can see the photos in the appendix too of those happy and smiling applicants, and a few of the Facebook posts that went up too from them recognizing Bruce County and their support for business development. So thank you very much.
Questions or comments? Ann?
Does this support like an online business?
Not necessarily. Most of them are probably bricks and mortar. I'm just going to scroll back up to the list. Sorry, just give me 1 second. This is when you should print it out, not scroll. So we've got the Ripley Artisan Shop is in downtown Ripley. Cindy Lou's Ice Cream Shop is the convenience store in Lions Head, was purchased and renovated into the ice cream shop. Positive Canine Academy, I'm not 100% familiar on that one, but I'm assuming since it's with dogs, it's probably not an online component. Grey Matter Brew Company is in downtown Kincardine. The Juice Bar as well. Interior Motives is just outside of Burgoyne. Bricks and Mortar, Epic Room in Wyerton is bricks and mortar, and so is Surf's Up in Kincardine. So the majority of them are bricks and mortar.
Any further comments? Paul?
These ones are brand new starters to some extent, but if they are expanding, they can qualify for the $5,000 too. So if there's an expansion proposal that the business has, or a purchase to take over a business, then they can apply to it as well. Yeah, so to answer that question, in that 6-month period, which is the mentorship and monitoring, our staff are working with them fairly regularly and visiting them and in constant contact with them to see how the business is doing. And that's before they receive that final grant payment, to sort of see that they've got 6 months successfully under their belt.
Thank you. Any other comments? I agree with you. I know that we had the Summer Starter program prior to this. There was some really great ideas and some businesses that became very successful out of it in the long run. So the next item then is Business to Bruce Core Program, and Kara is again going to present.
Sure. This is another good news story with regards to our partnership with the province and the funding for what we call the CORE program. The CORE program is a little more general in nature than the Starter Company Plus program, and that the province gives us funding to implement a number of activities ranging from one-on-one consultations, meeting with businesses, helping us with research and data collection, and helping them with business plan writing and training and workshops. So the CORE program, again, we've signed a new agreement with the province for 2 years. And I'm happy to sort of note in this report that the funding has increased in that to $124,000, very specifically $373. And that's to help offset our staffing costs and also those areas of activity that I mentioned. So this year we did host 2 major events and then a number of presentations, and I did a report earlier to committee on sort of the outreach that we received from that, but nearly 75 people participated in those events. And then we've developed what we think is a really solid outreach plan to market and communicate throughout Bruce County the opportunities related to business to Bruce. And I think what you're starting to see is the participation from across the county is really reflective of that marketing and outreach plan that we've done. And then as part of this as well, I know this was brought up earlier today, so I won't dwell on it on the business plan updates, but we partnered with Bruce County Library in order to bring forward access to business to Bruce in each of our library branches. So that's been a huge success. And as it notes there, we've received 147 inquiries and 142 consultations in our first year. So we're very excited by that, and I think that the province recognizes the effort that's gone into it by the business team, and to that end, we've, like I said, received the funding for 2018 and 2019 to that extent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kara. Any questions of Kara? Well, thank you, Kara. The next item then is an email, Ministry of Education, and Chris is going to just talk to this.
What's being said. The province has heard what's being said in the rural area, and they're potentially moving forward then with these changes as a result of the public consultation. Our submission was heard. I think there are potentially some changes coming, so potentially a good news story for rural Ontario.
Thank you. Any questions of this? And the next item is Emily Miller, Explore the Bruce Adventure Passport video, and Kara is going to present again.
So I really hope this is the end of your committee schedule today, because this will be a great way to end it. But if you'll remember, earlier in the year we had the Bruce County public speaking contestants here that had done well and moved on. And at that event, we had Emily Miller, who did her speech on the Explore the Bruce Adventure Passport. So following that county council session, I gave my card to Emily, and she gave it to her mom, and her mom got a hold of me and said, Emily would love to do a video on behalf of Bruce County. So hopefully we can click on that link and it'll work, and we'll be able to watch Emily's video that we'll be using in upcoming promotions.
Do you turn the lights down, Donna? Do you turn the lights down? Or from the switch? Volume issues, Kara.
Maybe just pause it and we can get the sound. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
I'd like to tell you some of my favorite things to do. Hiking on a cliff, 30 meters in the sky, through a forest of beautiful white birch trees, overlooking a bay of water with islands in the distance below. Feeling my feet sink into the soft white sand as I walk along one of the longest freshwater beaches in the world, running down a 100-feet-high sand dune that's moored along an ancient coastline, traveling on a high-speed jet boat to a national park, and hiking to a 100-year-old lighthouse and learning about what it's like to live there. Does this sound like a trip to a faraway destination? Does this sound like a place many people would love to go? It's really not that far away. This is where we live, and these are all the things you can do in Bruce County. I'd like to tell you about Explore the Bruce. You're going to need a passport. If you want to come along with me, Explore the Bruce is a great way to explore the place where you live. You'll find places you never even knew existed, and you'll have fun doing it. First, you'll need to get an Explore the Bruce Adventure Passport. You can explore Bruce County and punch special shapes into your official Explore the Bruce Passport. There have been over 140 different spots to collect the punches for over the 12 years the program has been running. To start your adventure, go to the Thorncrest Outfitters or the Bruce County Museum. If you happen to find one of the boxes before that, there should be a passport in the box. Read the instructions Explore the Bruce runs between May 1st and October 31st. If you're among one of the first explorers to complete at least 7 out of 12 punches, you can get Explore the Bruce t-shirt. If you complete your passport later in the season, you can still draw for some really cool prizes, like a stand-up paddleboard or a new kayak. My family has never ever won any of the prizes, but that doesn't really matter to us because on the way to the punch, my family saw so many beautiful things. At a place along the Niagara Escarpment called Elvis Monument, my family saw some glacial potholes. My family went there 2 years ago. After we did the Tobermory Punch, my family took the Flower Pot Express to Flower Pot Island. On the way there, the boat takes you to see 2 shipwrecks. One year, the water was so low, I could see some of the ships sticking out of the water. At Flower Pot Island, you can see some of the world-famous flower pot rock formations. There are so many more cool places I visited while I explored the Bruce, like Purple Valley, with its beautiful views and apple mushrooms, and the spiral staircase at Spirit Rock, but it would take me a really long time to describe them all. So I've been really bored, and a nice sunny day, not knowing what to do. My hope is that you now realize that there are some amazing things to do in Bruce County. Maybe discover even a few minutes away from your own home. So get outside and enjoy the place where you live.
It's funny. Sullen child. That's great.
That was very good. Any further comments or questions? Well, if not, then we need to move into closed session. We need a motion to move into closed session to discuss Ontario Municipal Board appeals pursuant to Section 239(2)E of the Municipal Act relating to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Paul, seconded by Robert.